So we'll start on the Mishnah on the bottom of Tes Amud Beis. Ein ben Shiloh l'Yerushalayim ela sheb'Shiloh ochlim kochim kalim l'maser sheni b'chol haroeh u'v'Yerushalayim lifnim min hachoma. So time of the differences between Shiloh where the Mishkan stood and Yerushalayim where the Beis HaMikdash stood. That in Shiloh there are certain foods, for example, kochim kalim are the korbanos which any Yisrael can eat, and a maser sheni is part of the produce that one has to bring up to Yerushalayim to eat. So we're saying when it comes to Shiloh, as long as you can see the city of Shiloh, then you're allowed to eat the kochim kalim there, and you're allowed to eat the maaser sheni there as well. However, Yerushalayim lifnim min hachoma, you have to be inside the walls of Yerushalayim in order to eat maaser sheni and kochim kalim. V'kan kochim nechalim lifnim min haklayim. Then everybody agrees that when it comes to kochim, the korbanos which only the Kohen can eat, then that must be eaten within the walls of the city. No, not the city. Within the walls of the Beis HaMikdash, or within the curtains of the Beis HaMikdash, depending if we're dealing with the Mishkan or the Beis HaMikdash. Now, the second difference is kedushas Shiloh yesh achareha heter, hu kedushas Yerushalayim ein achareha heter. It's funny how it starts off ein bein and then it already gives you two differences in the Mishnah. But when it comes to Shiloh, when the Mishkan was no longer in Shiloh, when the Mishkan was taken down, so yesh achareha heter meant, Rashi just explains here at the top, Kishecharva Shiloh hutru habamos, that once Shiloh was destroyed, the Mishkan there, so it was once again permitted for any individual to set up you could say a personal mizbeach and offer korbanos on that mizbeach. However, kedushas Yerushalayim ein achareha heter. However, once the Beis HaMikdash was built and then subsequently destroyed, ein achareha heter is no longer permitted for anybody to build their own personal mizbeach and offer korbanos. Okay, the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak shamati shemakrivim beveis chonyo bizman hazeh. So Rabbi Yitzchak says he heard that it is permissible to offer korbanos in Beis Chonyo bisman hazeh. What is Beis Chonyo? So Rashi explains Beis Chonyo, Mizbeach Chonyo beno shel Shimon HaTzadik. So we're talking about the Mizbeach that the Chonyo, who was the son of Shimon HaTzadik, built. Bana bama b'Mitzrayim l'shem shamayim. So he ran away to Mitzrayim and built a Mizbeach there, not for idol worship purposes, l'shem shamayim. He built it for with good intentions. Kedamina Meseches Menachem. So the whole story there, Shimon HaTzadik's other son got the kahuna. I think Chonyo got somewhat upset, ended up running away to Yerushalayim, and then set up his own mizbeach once he was in Mitzrayim. So Rabbi Yitzchak says that it's permissible to offer korbanos on that bama, on that mizbeach. So he must hold two things. Kasavar beis Chonyo la beis avodah zarah. It's a machlokes whether Chonyo set up his mizbeach for avodah zarah purposes or for with good intentions. So we're saying first of all he must hold that it was set up with good intentions, and therefore if it was avodah zarah certainly be forbidden. Vekasavar, and he must also hold kedusha rishona kitcha l'shaita below kitcha le'asid lavo. Which Rashi then explains kasavar kedusha. So it says kedusha, the holiness in Iskash Yerushalayim, when Yerushalayim was built, and the kedusha that came along with it, with the first Beis HaMikdash, eina kedusha le'olam, does not remain forever. Umishacharva, and once Yerushalayim was destroyed, hutru habamos. Once Yerushalayim was destroyed, it was once again permissible to offer korbanos on personal mizbeach. So dichsiv, and the proof for Rabbi Yitzchak is kilo vatem arata. This is Moshe speaking to the Jewish people. You have till this point you have not come to el hamnucha vel hanachala, to your resting place and to your inheritance. Menucha zo Shiloh, that's referring to Shiloh. Nachala zo Yerushalayim, that refers to Yerushalayim. So make ish nachala lemenucha. So we compared the two cities. Ma menucha yesh achareha heter. So too, when it comes to Shiloh, once Shiloh was destroyed, it was permissible to offer korbanos on the personal bamos. Af nachala yesh achareha heter. So too, when it comes to the nachala, when it comes to Yerushalayim, after Yerushalayim is destroyed, it's permissible to offer korbanos on the personal mizbeach. The question and the problem, which is not addressed here by the Rishonim, I'm sure it is addressed somewhere, is that Chonyo seemingly lived in the time of the second Beis HaMikdash. So how is he permitted to offer korbanos if the Beis HaMikdash was around in his time? Somebody this morning suggested maybe we're talking about the fact that we're dealing with now maybe after the second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed as well, but I'm not sure what the answer is to that. So now continuing with the Gemara. So Amrulei, they said to Rabbi Yitzchak, Amras, did you in fact say this statement? So Amar Lahu lo, he denied it. He said no. So Amarava, what do you mean? Elohim Amra, I swear that I heard him say it. And I in fact learned this from him. Umay taimakahadarbe. So why did he retract? If he taught this, why is he now denying it? Why is he saying that he does not believe in the statement? Mishum kasha de Rav Mari, because of the question posed to him by Rav Mari, Demusi Rav Mari, from our Mishnah. Kedushas Shiloh yesh acharei heter. Our Mishnah just told us, after Shiloh was destroyed, it was permitted to offer korbano, sacrifices on the personal mizbeach, but Kedushas Yerushalayim ein acharei heter. But after Yerushalayim was destroyed, you're not permitted to offer bamos, which seems to apply kedusha rishona kicha l'shaita v'kicha l'asid lavo, that the kedusha remains in Yerushalayim. So that was the question posed. So seemingly that's why Rabbi Yitzchak maybe changed his opinion. Ve'otnan, and furthermore we have another Mishnah. Misheba'u Yerushalayim, once they came to Yerushalayim, the second Beis Hamikdash, first Beis Hamikdash, Nesru habamos, it was no longer permissible to offer korbanos on the personal mizbeach. Be'lo hayalehem od heter, and there was never, from here on in, there was never going to be permission to do so. V'hi haisal inachala, right? That was their inheritance forever.
Didn't Rabbi know this Mishnah? That he would have initially said different.
Oh, so we're going to say now Tanahi. So it's in fact we're going to say that maybe it's a machlokes Tanai, and there is obviously we're seeing here our Mishnah seems to imply kedusha rishona kicha l'shaita v'kicha l'asid lavo, that the kedusha remains forever. We're going to try to bring another opinion which seems to say that no, that it doesn't remain forever, and once the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the kedusha no longer remains. So what's the bright? So how are we going to try to prove this? So Tanahi. Titznan Amar Rabbi Eliezer Shamati Kshayu Bonim Behechal. So Rabbi Eliezer says when they were building the second Beis Hamikdash, Osin Kilaim LaHechal, they made curtains to boundary off the Hechal, Uklaim LaAzara. There are at least three different types of kedusha when you get to the Temple Mount. You have the Kodesh Kodashim, where the Aron was, and only the Kohen Gadol can enter on Yom Kippur. Then you have the Kodesh, which is also called the Heichal. And in that area, that's where the Kohanim did the Avoda, and only Kohanim could enter. That's where the Menorah was, the Mizbeach HaZahav, and the Shulchan. And then outside of that, you had the Azara, where any Yisrael can enter, and that's where the Mizbeach HaNachoshes, where they offered the animal sacrifices on. So what Rabbi Eliezer is saying is, I heard that they made a curtain outside, for the Heichal, to boundary off that area where only the Kohanim can go. Uklaim Lazara, and they made curtains to make a boundary for the Azara as well. Ella, there was a difference between these two curtains. These were the curtains that they made before they actually got around to building the walls of the Beis Hamikdash. Ela shebeheichal boni mi bachutz. When it came to the Heichal, they had the curtains and they built the walls on the outside of the curtains, which Rashi says, "Shahayu aklumi prushim lifni me'ove achoma shelo yikantu aboni lesoch ha'heichal," because the ones who were building it are not allowed to enter into the heichal, so they have to make sure to, when they built the wall, to build it on the outside, because they're not kohanim, they couldn't go inside. Uva azara, when it comes to the azara, bonim mi bifnim, they built the wall on the inside of the curtains. So that's statement number one. What is this trying to prove? So if you look in Rashi, Kilayim Laheichal. So what do we think at this point? Kasal Kadaitech, at this point we think, Bimkom Chomos Heichal. We think that these curtains are being put there in place of the walls that have not been built yet. Sheyehe Mizbeach Habanui Ba'azara, because we want the Mizbeach that rests in the Azara to be considered Asher Karui Asher Pesach Ohel Moed. We want it to be considered. Right, the Mizbeach has to be at the entrance of the Ohel Moed. So how do you have an entrance? You have to make some sort of boundary, some sort of wall, so that one can be at the entrance of the other. She'omali Kain, because if the Mizbeach is not at the entrance of it, Lo Hayu Makrivin Ad Sheigmar Habinyan. They would not be permitted to offer korbanos until they finished the actual walls of the Beis Hamikdash. V'heim hischilu lahakrib korbanos mishabau sham b'mei koresh. But as soon as the people started coming back from Babel, in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, they started offering korbanos right away before the structure was completed. Kimoshe kasu b'sefer Ezra, as is taught in Sefer Ezra, etc. So what that means is as follows. What we think Rabbi Eliezer is saying is that Kedusha Rishona was Bata, right? Kicha L'Shaita V'lo Kicha L'Asid Lavo. Why is that? The Kedusha, once the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, all the Kedusha was destroyed with it. And therefore, if they wanted to start offering Korbanos again, they had to come back and build, quote-unquote, build and be Beis HaMikdash again. So they didn't need to fully finish it. As long as they put up the curtains to make the boundaries, it would then have the status of being Pesach Ohel Moed, and it would be permitted to offer Korbanos. So we think that he's saying Kicha L'Shaita V'lo Kicha L'Asid Lavo. As opposed to, if you go back to the Gemara, the next statement, Ve'amar Rabbi Yoshua, Shamati Shemakrivin Afal Pi She'ein Bayis. I heard that you can give Korbanos even though there's no Beis HaMikdash. And Ochlin Koche Kochim Afal Pi She'ein Klaim. And be permitted to eat, can the Kohanim be permitted to eat what they could in the Korban, even though there are no curtains setting off the Heichal, and Kochim Kalim Master Sheni Afal Pi She'ein Choma, even though there's no wall in Yerushalayim. Why? Mipnei shekedusha rishona kicha l'shaita v'kicha l'asid lavo, that the kedusha remains. So I don't care if the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed and all the curtains are destroying. The kedusha remains, and therefore be permitted to continue offering the korbanos. So based on all that, we say Michlal de Rabbi Eliezer savar lo kicha l'asid lavo. So that's why, since Rabbi Yoshua explicitly states the kedusha remains, we're implying, since Rabbi Eliezer seems to argue, that the kedusha does not remain. So this seems to be the machlokas Tanaim, and this would be the two opinions. That could be how Rabbi Yitzchak initially made his statement, because there is an opinion in the Tanaim which would agree with him. So Amarle Ravina Ravashi Mimai. How do you know this is true? Dilma dekuli alma kedusha rishona kicha l'shaita v'kicha l'asid lavo. Maybe everybody believes that the kedusha in the Beis HaMikdash remains. Umar my deshmiele ka'amar, Umar my deshmiele ka'amar. And each one, again, both of their statements started shamati. So Rabbi Eliezer heard a statement, and he just quoted exactly what he heard. Rabbi Yeshua heard a statement, he quoted exactly what he heard, and don't make any inferences from what Rabbi Eliezer said that the Kedusha was batel. So then, if that's so, we ask, if we want to believe that even Rabbi Eliezer believes the Kedusha remains, then what was the purpose of putting up these curtains? You didn't need the curtains there. You didn't need to set up the Beis HaMikdash again in order to restart offering the Korbanos. You could have done it right away. The Kedusha remains. So we answer, you're right, let's niusa bi'alma. They didn't set it up for any sort of Kedusha purposes. They set it up to make sure, to hide the Kohanim. The Kohanim want to do their avoda without being seen necessarily. They put it up just as just as the wall, but not for any sort of Kedusha purpose. So now we say, so now we just lost our precedent. Now we don't have a shita which implies that the Kedusha Rishona was batel, because we're saying maybe even Rabbi Eliezer agrees it remains. So now we want to say maybe it's like the following machlokas Tanaim. Elakihani Tanai, Titania, Amar Rabbi Yishmael b'Rabbi Yossi, Lama Manu Chachamim Es Elu. So why did Chachamim count the following cities? What's this referring to? So look in Rashi Es Elu, we're talking about Ayaros Nimnu b'Perak Basra de Erkin. In the last parak in Erkin, they list several cities. Le'inyan Batei Arei Choma. When it comes to there are specific halachos that apply to walled cities in terms of who it goes back to in the Yovel year. It's all in Parshas Bahar. So in the last parak of Erchin, they list some of these cities. They list some of these walled cities. Shayu Mukafos Chomim Mos Yeshua ben Nun. That these two were walled cities from the time of Yeshua ben Nun, similar to the walled cities in the first Mishnah in our Meseches. Ve'ein Sham Yoser Mitisha, and it only lists 9 cities. So let's go back to the Brisa. So Titania Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi Lama Manu Chachamim Es Elu. Why did they list these 9 cities as the walled cities from the time of Yoshua? Shek Sha'alu B'nei Hagola, because when they came back in the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, Matzu Es Elu, they found these cities V'kichum. They sanctified them. Aval Harishon knows all the other walled cities from the time of Yeshua ben Nun. Bitlu, they were all, their kedusha was nullified. Misha Batla Haaretz, once everyone went into exile. So Alma Kasavar Kedusha Rishona Kicha L'Shaita V'lo Kicha L'Asid Lavo. This seems to imply that the kedusha, once the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, the kedusha is destroyed as well. That's the implication here. Uraminhu. However, we seem to have a contradiction. Amar Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi v'chi elu bilvad hayu. Whereas only these 9 cities. V'halo kvar ne'amar. We have a pasuk in Devarim which says Shishim ir kol chevel Argov. There are 60 cities in the Argov strip, whatever you want to call it. Uchsiv kol ele arim betzuros choma gvoha. All these are walled cities. Right, this is Moshe talking, Jewish people going into Israel. So certainly these, at least 60 walled cities as they enter the land of Israel. Ella, lama manu chachamim es elu. So why they chachamim only list these 9? Shek sha'alu b'nei hagola matzu elu v'kichum. Because when they went up, they found these cities and they sanctified them. So we say kichum hashta. Did they have to sanctify them right now? And they went back in the time of the second base of Mikdash. Ha'amri lo tzricha likdushe. There was no need to re-sanctify these cities. Ela matzues elu. They only found these 9 cities, even though their walls maybe were still intact. Umnaum, and therefore they counted these 9s. Below elu bilvad. However, walled cities are not limited to the 9 that we're counting right here. Ela kol shetala lecha mesores biadecha miavosecha. If you have any tradition from your forefathers, shemukefes choma bimos Yeshua bin Nun. If you have a tradition that any city in Israel was any city was walled from the time of Yeshua bin Nun, kol hamitzvos halalu no. All of the mitzvos of a walled city apply to those cities. Why? Because the kedusha remains, and even though Israel was destroyed and they went into Galus, the kedusha remains in those cities. So now the problem is we have these 2 opinions. But now the Gemara says Kasha the Rabbi Yishmael. The problem is they're both made by Rabbi Yishmael. So it's hard to have 2 different opinions, right? We're trying to look for 2 opinions, but it's all made from the same person. He's contradicting himself. It doesn't work so well. So first we suggest Shrei Tanai Aliba the Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi. So either it's not really contradiction of Rabbi Yishmael, 2 Talmidim heard him, and obviously they heard him differently. One of them thought like this, one of them thought like that, and they end up with 2 opinions, but Rabbi Yishmael is not contradicting himself. I may think this might be better precedent for us. Ha Rabbi Elazar bar Yossi Amra. No, the first brisa was Rabbi Yishmael bar Rabbi Yossi, and this second one, where the kedusha remains forever, was not Rabbi Yishmael bar Rabbi Yossi, but was in fact Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Yossi. The Tanya Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Yossi Amar Asher Lo Choma. Talking about again the walled cities. Even though it's no longer walled, as long as it was walled back in that time, that it still has the dinim of a walled city, which we're saying here implies that Kedusha Rishona Kicha L'Shaita, and it remains. Big Kicha La'asit Lavo, and therefore we can have Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Yossi is that opinion. Rabbi Shmuel thinks that the Kedusha is Batel, and now we found almost a precedent for how Rabbi Yitzchak can suggest that the Kedusha Rishona was Batel.
How can Kedusha Rishona stays here but not on Har Sinai?
There's no, why, I mean, we never talk about any sort of Kedusha with Har Sinai. You're saying why not? There's no Beis HaMikdash there. Certainly, you're right, God's presence was there. But, I don't know...
Is this intrinsic Kedusha when you say Kedusha Rishona? In other words, intrinsic, or because of the fact there was a Beis HaMikdash there?
Well, it can't be intrinsic because it only came once they set up the Beis HaMikdash. They were living in Israel for hundreds of years before the Beis HaMikdash was built. And I think we're assuming there was no Kedusha. The Kedusha really only came once they built the physical structure of the Beis HaMikdash. Then the question is, once they, you could say, put this physical structure there and sanctified it, does that remain forever, or is it almost based on whatever's there, and once it's destroyed, it goes along with it? It's a very complicated... The Kedusha Rishona, whether it remains or not, is a very complicated sugya, and it deals with going back in the time of Bayit Sheni. How do you deal with that, and how you paskin? I certainly don't have clarity on the whole sugya right now to explain, but... Now the Gemara for the next several DAF are going to do a lot of Agadata, talking, and it's going to really go through the psukim of the Megillah and give interesting midrashim on all of them. So we're going to start with that right here. Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh, the first 3 words of the Megillah. Amar Rabbi Levi v'Tema Rabbi Yonasan Davar ze misores bi'adeinu mi'anshei Knesset Agdola. We have a tradition from the leaders of the Whenever you find the word Vayihi, it implies that something bad is going to happen. Now we're going to list about 15 examples. Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh in the Megillah, Have Haman. Haman came around. Vayhi b'mei Shvona Shoftim in the beginning of Sefer Rus. So Havarav, there was a famine. Vayhi ki hechel ha'adam larov, at the end of Parshas Bereishis, when man started populating the world, what happened? Vayar Hashem ki rabba ra'as ha'adam, man was evil, and then he had to bring the flood to destroy the world. Vayhi ben osam mikedem, this is the Dor Haflaga, when they built the tower up to rebel against God. Hava nivne lanu ir, right? That's the story that follows that. Vayhi bimei Amrafel. So in the days of Amrafel, this is when the kings captured Lot and Avram had to go to war. Asu milchama, there was a battle. Vayhi bios Yoshua b'Yericho. This is before, when Yoshua enters the land, before Yericho. V'charbo shlufa biyado, he encounters a man who's holding a sword, who is an angel. Vayhi Hashem es Yoshua. And then the pasuk says that Hashem was with Yoshua, and this was after the battle of Yericho, the first battle they won. Vayimalu b'nei Yisrael. B'nei Yisrael sinned; they weren't supposed to take any of the spoils. Achan came along, take the spoils. They lost their next war. Vayi ish echad min harabasayin. This is the beginning of Sefer Shmuel. So Kias Chana Ahev Hashem Sagar Rachma. That's where we learn where Chana was barren; she didn't have any children. Vayihi. Supposed to be ki kasher zaken Shmuel, when Shmuel got old, velo halchu banav bidrachav, and tells that his sons didn't follow in his path. Vayhi David l'chol drachav maskil v'Hashem imo, told that whatever David did, he was successful. Hashem was with him. Then we're told Vayhi Shaul oyen es David. That's when we're told that Shaul was there eyeing, going after David, trying to kill him. Vayhi ki yashav hamelech beveiso, told that David was sitting in his palace. God tells him, you're not allowed to build the base of Mikdash, only your son will be able to. So now we ask, those are all the examples. Parsha Shmini, when they're inaugurating the Mishkan, it says Vayhi, V'Tanya, and we have a Brisa, Oso Yom Ha'isas Simcha Lifnei Kadosh Baruch Hu, Ki Yom Shenivru Bo Shamayim Va'aretz. That day was as happy as Kadosh Baruch Hu as the day that the world was created. How do we know that? Because Ksiv Hacha Vayhi Bayom Hashmini, and Ksiv Hasam Vayhi Erev Vayhi Voker. So we make that Ktira Shava. So it seems to be a very happy day, and that's Vayhi. So we answer Hashachiv Nadav Avihu. It's true, but that Simcha is somewhat lessened because that was the day where Nadav and Avihu were killed. V'haksiv, but now we have several other problems. Vayhi bishmonim shana ve'abar me'el shana. We're told, right? Vayhi use the word Vayhi, and then that's when the base of Mikdash. Then it tells us about the building of the base of Mikdash, which is happy. V'haksiv vayhi kasher ra'a Yaakov es Rachel. And we're told when Yaakov marries Rachel, that was happy, which is somewhat interesting because everything that follows with Lavan, you could have maybe said wasn't so happy, but certainly here we believe that that's a good event. V'haksiv, and furthermore, vayhi erev vayvoker yom echad, all the days of creation. V'hayika sheni, v'hayika shlishi, v'hayika tuva. You have all these cases where it says vayhi, and it seems to be very positive. So Amar Ravashi, Ravashi changes. He says no. Kol vayihi ikahachi vikahachi. Whenever you have the word vayihi, it can mean good, it can be good, it can be bad. But vayihi bimei, when we're told it's in the days of this vayihi bimei, in their days, eino elo lashon tsar, then we know that it's bad. Chamisha vayihi bimei havu, and there are 5 examples of this. Vayihi bimei Achashverosh, we mentioned. Vayihi bimei Shvora Shoftim, beginning of Sefer Rus, with the famine. Vayhi b'mei Amrafel, with the war with Avraham. Vayhi b'mei Achaz. Achaz was the king of Yehuda, and the king of Israel and the king of Aram, I think, came to attack him. Vayhi b'mei Yehoyakim, which was in this previous week's Haftorah, and then we're told about the Galus. So Vayhi b'mei certainly has a negative connotation. All other Vayhis can go either way. Okay, next statement. Amar ve'amar Rav Levi davar zeh mesoros bi'adeinu mi'avosenu. We have another tradition. Amot ve'amatzia achim havu. Amot, Rashi tells us, was the father of Yeshayahu Hanavi, and Amatzia was one of the kings of Yehuda. So he tells us that they're brothers. So my Kamash Malan, very nice. Who cares almost? Why do we need to know they're brothers? So Kihad Amar Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani Amar Rabbi Yonasan, to teach us the following: Kol Kala Shehid Tzinua Beveis Chamiha, any daughter-in-law who is tsanua, who is modest in her father-in-law's house, Zochav Yotzimi Menam Lachim Unviim, will merit to have kings and prophets descend from her. Minalan, how do we know this? Mitamar, from Tamar. Again, Tamar in Sefer Bereishis, Tamar marries 2 of Yehuda's sons. marries one son, dies, marries the next son, dies. Yehuda has another son. Yehuda doesn't want to give her to marry. He says, "I'll bring you back when he's old enough. Then you can marry him." And he never offers his last son to Tamar. She gets all upset. She's stuck almost. So what she decides to do, dress up as a harlot, go on the street, finds Yehuda, has relations with her. Eventually, Yehuda gets upset, says, you betrayed me," and then she realizes that it was he who had the relations with her, and they end up married. And really, all descendants of Sheva Yehuda come from Yehuda and Tamar. So we learn this principle that if you're modest in your father-in-law's house, you will merit to have kings and prophets descend from you. Why? Dichsiv vayir'eha Yehuda vayachsheveha lizona. That Yehuda saw her on the road, and he thought that she was a harlot. Ki chisita paneha, because she covered her face. So mishum dechisita paneha vayachsheveha lizona, because she covered her face, therefore he thought she was a harlot. So ella mishum dechisita paneha beveis chamiha. Again, he's dealing with his daughter-in-law. Since she was tsanua and I guess covered her face in her father-in-law's house, v'lo hava yadala, and he didn't really maybe even know what she looked like. Zachsa v'yatzu mimena malachim u'nevi'im. She merited to have kings and prophets descend from her. Melachim miDavid. So we know the kings because all the kings come from Sheva Yehuda, and Tamar is the mother of all of Sheva Yehuda. So certainly we know the kings come from her. And Nevi'im, how do we know Nevi'im? The Amar Reb Levi Mesoris Biyadenu Mi'avoseinu, because of what we just said, that Amot ve'Amatzia achim havu. That Amot and Amatzia were brothers. Amatzia was a king, so obviously his brother was from Sheva Yehuda. Uchsiv, and his brother's son, Chazon Yeshayahu ben Amot, was Yeshayahu, was a Navi. So we know there from that Tamar merited to have descendants who were both kings and prophets. Rabbi Levi is another statement of a tradition that he had. Makom Aaron eino min hamida, that the Aaron took up no space in the Kodesh Kodashim. Tanya nami hachi. We have another brisa to prove this. Aaron she'asa Moshe yeshlo eser amos l'chol ruach. That we say that there were from where the Aaron was in the Kodesh Kodashim, there were 10 amos in every direction. Uksiv v'lifnei hadvir esrim ama orech. And we are told that inside the Kodesh Kodashim there were 20 amos. So if there's 10 amos from every direction of the Aron, and there are only 20 amos, that means the Aron takes up no space. Uksiv, and we have another teaching, Knaf akruv ha'echad eser amos, Knaf kruv ha'echad eser amos. So we also know about the kruvim that were in the Kodesh Kodashim, that the wings were each 10 amos, that spread 20 amos. So Aaron Gufe Hecha Havakai, where was the Aaron? If there were 10 almost every direction, where was the Aaron? Elolav Shmamina B'neis Haya Omeid. It was a miracle, and it took up no space, whatever that means, if anyone can actually understand what that means. Okay, now we're going to offer many. It's going to go on to the next DAF as well. When different Amoraim, when they would begin their opening shir on Megillah Esther, how would they begin their shir? How would they begin discussing the Megillah? So Rabbi Yonasan pasach lapitcha lahai parshas tamehacha. So he offered, when he started giving his drasha, he opened from the following pasuk: V'kamti alehem, I will rise upon them. V'chrati leBavel, and I will destroy Bavel's shame. Ushar, thank you. Shem ushar benin v'neched neum Hashem. So what are these four things? What is it going to destroy? What are these four things referring to? Shem zehaksav. That refers to the text the Babylonian text. Whatever they wrote in, their language was going to be destroyed. Sha'ar zolashon. Their language going to be destroyed. Nin zemalchus. I'm going to destroy their kingdom. V'neched zovashti. I think that that's based on the fact that Neched means grandchild, and Vashti was the granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar, who was king of Babel, destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. So Hashem says he's going to destroy all these, and that's what happens in Megillah Esther. That's how he begins. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani pasach la pischa la haiparshta mehacha. He began from the following pasuk from Yeshayahu, which we read in the Haftorah of the fast days. Tachas na'atzut ya'aleh v'rosh, v'zachas hasir pad ya'aleh hadas. That in the place of the thorns, a cypress tree will come out, and in place of the nettle, the myrtle will come up. So Tachas Hanatzut, who's that referring to? Tachas Haman Harasha. That's referring to Haman Harasha Sa'asa Atzmo Avodah Zarah, right? That he maybe even made himself into Avodah Zarah. Tichsiv, and we know that the Na'atzut refers to Avodah Zarah. the pasuk of v'chol hana atzutzim, v'chol hana alulim, on top of all the branches, on top of all of the thorns. Slightly unclear how that teaches anything about avodah zarah, but the Gemara certainly assumes that. So in place of Haman, who's going to come up? Ya'alev v'rosh. So what's the v'rosh referring to? Zeh Mordechai. That refers to Mordechai, shenikra rosh l'chol ha-besamim, who is considered first of all the spices. Shnei Mark, when it talks about the Ketores in the Torah, ve'ata kach l'cha besamim rosh mordoror. And when it talks about taking the besamim, the first one you should take is the myrrh. And how do we translate that into Aramaic? Mardror, Mari Dachi, which sounds like Mordechai. So that's how we know that the V'rosh is referring to Mordechai. And Tachas HaSirpad, in the place of the nettle. That refers to Tachas Vashti Harasha, Bas Beno Shel Nebuchadnezzar, referring to the evil Vashti, who was the granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar, Harasha, Saraf Refidas Beis Hashem. And he was the one who burnt the dwelling place of Hashem. So the last letters of Sirpad are Reish Pei Daled, and here we're referring to the basement, Refidas Hashem. And he destroyed that. That's how Sirpad is referring to Vashti. Dichsi Refitaso Zahav. We know that God's the base of Mikdash is gold. So who will come in Vashti's place? Ya'aleh Hadas. Zu Esther Hatzadekes Shenikres Hadasa. This is referring to Esther, whose name is Hadasa. Shnemar Vahi Omenes Hadasa. Then the pasuk continues, V'haya Lahashem L'Shem, that this will be a name for God. Zo Mikra Megillah, that refers to the reading of the Megillah. La'os Olam Lo Yikares, it should be a sign for them, will never be destroyed. Elu Yemei Purim, that refers to the holiday of Purim. The next, Amor Tan Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Pasach La Piskalai Parshta Mehacha, he opened his drasha with the following pasuk from the Tochacha in Sefer Devarim. V'haya ka'asher sas Hashem alechem lehitiv la'etzchem. The same way Hashem will, be happy to bring the good for you. Kain yasis lehara eschem. Even though I think the pasuk here says lehavir eschem, but so too we'll bring it back and make it bad for you. So, is Hashem really rejoiced at the downfall of Rishaim, or Jewish people in this case? But we have a pasuk in Divrei Yamim referring to King Yehoshaphat when he goes to battle. When he went out in front of the soldiers, they said, Hodu LaHashem, thank Hashem ki le'olam chasto. Ve'amar Rabbi Yochanan, what words are missing? Mipnei ma lo nemar kitov v'hodaza. Why didn't they say Hodu LaHashem kitov ki le'olam chasto? Because Hashem doesn't rejoice it's not tov, it's not good for him when the enemies die, and therefore they omitted those two words. And another proof for this principle, referring to the Egyptians chasing the Jewish people, that they didn't encounter each other all night. So the Malachim wanted to sing Shira that Hashem was drowning the Mitzrim. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Masa Yadai Tovim Bayam V'atem Omrim Shira. My creations are drowning, and you're going to sing Shira. No way. So we see how Hashem is upset. It doesn't rejoice at the fact that anybody dies. So Amar Rabbi Elazar, okay, Hu Einosas. You're right. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not happy. Aval Acheri Mesis. But when we get punished, then others rejoice. V'dikanami Dichsiv Kain Yasis. We can infer that from the Psukim. It says Yasis, that Hashem will make those happy. Not referring that Hashem will be happy, but our enemies will be happy when we're punished. And it doesn't say Yasus, that Hashem himself will be the one to be rejoicing, so therefore that's not a problem. Rabbi Ava Bar Kahana Pasach La Piskalai Parshta Mehacha. He brought another pasuk from which he'll begin his drasha on Megillah Esther from Koheles. Le'adam shetov lefanav nasan chochma v'das. So the man who was good in front of Hashem, he gave knowledge and wisdom and happiness. Zeh Mordechai Tzadik. That's referring to Mordechai. V'lachotei nasan inyan le'esof v'lichnos, and to the sinner will give matter to gather everyone together. Zeh Haman. And why? Laseis letov v'pnei halokim, to pass off to the good one in front of God. So the Mordechai Esther, meaning Haman, whatever Haman had was passed over to those better than him, Mordechai and Esther. Tichsiv vatasem Esther es Mordechai al beis Haman, because Mordechai was placed on, whatever Haman was in charge of, now Mordechai was in charge of. He took all of what Haman had. And Rabbi Bar Afram Pasach La Piskalai Parshta Mehacha, he opened with the following pasuk: V'samtich his'i be'elam, I will put my chair, for Hashem talking in elam, which Rashi tells us elam is referring to Shushan Habira. It's referred to like that in Sefer Daniel, and that's where Achashverosh lived. V'havareti misham melech v'sarim, and I will destroy the king and ministers there. Melech, so Vashti, refers to Vashti. V'sarim ze Haman ba'aseres banab, refers to Haman and his 10 sons. I will conclude with this next one. Rav Dimi bar Yitzchak pasuk piskalai parshta mehacha. He opened with the following pasuk: Ki avadim anachnu. This is in Sefer Ezra, saying, "We are your servants. Uvavdu seinu lo azavnu alokenu." And even though we've been in servitude, we haven't left God. Vayet aleinu chesed lifnei malchei paras. And God has extended to us His kindness in front of the kings of Paras. Masai, what's this referring to? Bizman Haman, the time of Haman, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu saved the Jewish people. Have a great day.